Namaste. Okay, guys, this is Mr. Golis, and I just wanted to give you guys an overview on Votech Physics. It says Votech Physics. Really, the name of the course is Technical Physics. I still think of it as Votech Physics, whatever. All right, so sometimes I'll use the two names interchangeably. But the bottom line is it's a course that's designed for no matter why you're here, whether you want to be an engineer or something like that, it was mainly designed for the automotive for the automotive students, and to a lesser degree, the carpentry students. And basically, it's a course that will teach you the basics of physics for the job that you are aspiring to do. So. Which it happens to be, for the most part, automotive. All right. Why? Because an auto mechanic, all right, you don't need to know a ton of science, but you should know some basic science, specifically the science of physics. Why? Because physics is the science of forces in motion, and that studies that. And obviously that's what a vehicle is. A vehicle is a way that we control forces in nature in order to move from place to place. Okay, so that's why it's important that you have just at the very least, a basic knowledge of certain aspects of physics. Okay, and that's why we do that. All right, so let me present this. Okay, here we go. All right, there we go. So here's why. All right, because if you take a look at this vehicle, again, as I said, and this, by the way, is this vehicle is a 1970 Dodge Charger with a blower on top. And, I picked this one because if God himself were a vehicle, God would look like this, right? It's there. I can't say enough about this car. It's just completely awesome. All right. But what a vehicle is, it's designed by these people called engineers. And these engineers spend 4 full years studying physics, among other things, because they need to in order to create something like this. And again, essentially what it is, it's a way of controlling forces in nature. In this case, the explosion or combustion of gasoline or some other volatile fuel, and translating it into motion that we find useful. So we can drive to work, and we can drive to the store, and things like that. Okay. And if you're going to work on something like this, you should have a basic knowledge of physics, okay, which is why you're here. And this is important to your education and to your career. All right. If you are going to be an engineer, and I think a couple of you are in this class, then obviously you need to know basic physics, because that's what you're going to be studying for about 14 hours every single day for 4 years in college, all right, with the exception of breaks, obviously, and things like that, winter break and summer break and so on. Okay. All right. So it's the technology behind your future job, and that's why you're here. All right. Also, we're in a time now where the technology is changing, and I know it's kind of a fuzzy picture, but this is an electric vehicle. And electric vehicles, I think, your generation will start to transition to these things as we kind of get off fossil fuels in the future. And everyone who knows me knows that I'm not a tree hugging hippie. That's not the way I am. But I'm an environmentalist in the practical science sense, in the sense that fossil fuels they do pollute. There's no getting around that. All the gasoline that goes into your tank eventually goes into the air. All that matter goes into the air. And we've been doing that for, a couple of centuries now. We first started with burning coal, and then we went to refining oil to make gasoline. And we've been doing that, putting that stuff in the air for a couple of centuries. And we all know that's not a good thing to do. But the other thing is also another very practical reason. Even if we didn't want to get off fossil fuels, the practicality is fossil fuels are non-renewable, which means there's only a certain amount in the Earth's crust. And once you burn them all, that's it. you can't make more fossil fuels, okay? But you can make electricity through a variety of ways, right? Obviously, solar, wind, hydroelectric, and nuclear, which we can do. All right. So I think that as the century goes on, your generation, and you guys are the next generation, which is going to take over from my generation, you'll find me saying that to you guys all the time. I don't think we say that to young people enough, all right, to get them to realize that you're not going to be young forever. And eventually you will be the adults. You will be the next generation of adults. And your generation will probably start to transition to these things. And these things, frankly, to tell you the truth, I was skeptical at first, but they're getting to be pretty cool, actually. There's some electric cars out there that are really powerful and are frankly really fast. And I'm hoping that, we transition to electric vehicles and that we have another golden age of the American muscle car, like I used to observe when I was a kid back in the, and I'm going to say this, the 1970s. Yeah, I know what just flashed through your brain, like how old is this guy? But it was a cool time for cars, back then. And I'm hoping that we get another cool time for cars, as we go to a different propulsion system. And these things are becoming more powerful. And you need to know some electricity and magnetism. I'm going to teach that to you. Why? Because, maybe in your 20s and stuff, you'll still mainly be working on gasoline powered cars, but I know you don't want to think of yourself this way, but one day you will be 40, 45. And what kind of cars are you going to be working on in the year 2043 or 2050 or something? You guys will see that, whether I see that, year is questionable, but the chances that you guys will live to see the year 2040, 2050, 2060 is, unless you get hit by a bus or something, are pretty certain. Okay. So what are we going to be driving then? All right. And this is just an up and coming technology, and don't blow it off and this is why your history courses are important, because human beings transition from power source to power source. Okay. We used animals as our power source for the longest time. And then, when we started trading on a massive scale, we went to wind powered ships and things like that, and that was a technology. Tall ships, a lot of thought went into, there were engineers hundreds of years ago who put a lot of thought and a lot of science into making a tall ship. That's a piece of technology. It's old tech, but there was a lot of thought that went into those things. You didn't just tack a ship together and the rigging together. You didn't just put it up. All right. And then we transitioned to coal and steam engines. All right. And which gave us an advantage because you didn't have to depend on the wind, and it didn't matter which way the wind was blowing. You can go in any direction you wanted for as long as you wanted, as long as you had fuel. Okay. And it was an advantage. And that was the 1800s thereabouts, where we took that technology very, very far, about as far as it could go. But that technology had limitations. All right. Steam power is only 10% efficient, which means that 90% of the heat energy that was generated by burning coal was wasted, and only 10% went into motion. And so we transitioned to this great new power source called internal combustion engines, right, based on refined oil. And that boosted our efficiency to 30%, which is still pretty bad, but it tripled it. All right. And we've taken that technology about as far as it's going to go. We've been using that for over 100 years. All right. On a regular basis now. And, it's kind of it. So we'll probably have to kind of go back and look at a new power source. And electricity is, we've had it and understood it for a couple of centuries now, but we've never really used it as a power source. All right. Initially, when they did start making cars, they did make electric cars, and they were competing with gasoline cars. The problem is gasoline won out because they didn't have the battery technology in the 1890s, in the 1910s. They used the old lead acid batteries, which were, they're okay, but they're a lot of things wrong with them. They didn't store as much charge. They had to be, they took a long time to charge. They are also dangerous. They're prone to blowing up. All right, they get leaks, acid leaks. They generate hydrogen gas, which, if you get a spark, will actually ignite, and that's kind of inconvenient. So electric vehicles lost out to gasoline vehicles, but we have much better in the 21st century. We have much better battery technology now than we did back then, and so I think you guys are. It's going to be more common that automotive, that mechanics start working on these things, and you better know what you're doing with these things, because a 300-volt direct current battery will kill you. It will drop you dead. Okay, that kind of voltage, the amount of current that it will generate if it goes through your body is just, you probably wouldn't even know what hit you, is what's going to happen. You cannot make a mistake with that kind of power source. All right, so you're gonna have to learn. All right, and I think the Votech fields, and I really believe this. I come from a blue collar background. I know I'm a teacher, and all that. And in this video, I'm just wearing a t-shirt, but I usually wear a tie, to work for the most part. But I come from a very blue collar family. My brother is an electrician. My father worked in a factory, and I'm really kind of blue collar at heart. And so I kind of identify a lot with the trade jobs, in addition to the fact that I spent 12 years in the Army, and I was just around motor pools all the time. And you're fixing things and you're maintaining equipment, and that's essential. You have to keep the vehicles running in order to fight and survive and all that. So I kind of am very sympathetic to the trades. All right, I think they're very important. In addition to that, just philosophically, and again, you need to know stuff like this. With the whole pandemic that we survived, the essential workers were the trades. I have you look at a job like a financial advisor, and yeah, those guys are important. They help you keep your money in order and organize your retirement and all that. But ultimately, when the pandemic hit, we found out really fast that who's more important. Was it the financial consultant or the hedge fund manager, or was it the guy driving the truck for Walmart, all right, delivering the toilet paper there so that people could buy it at 4 a.m, or was it the mechanic who was keeping the vehicles running in order to keep the supply chain going, which was ultimately essential. So we kind of have a better perspective on that now. Now, that being the case, your jobs, unlike when I was growing up in the golden age of muscle cars in the 70s, cars were easier to fix. You saw people in all the time. Americans were in love with their cars, and they were all made in America, by the way. Everyone had a Chevy or a Ford, and that was it. You didn't buy a foreign car, they were all made here. And people, like, you would see, it was common to see people out on a summer day, like with their hoods up, tuning up their cars themselves, because they were simpler vehicles back then. All right, you could open up the hood and you could see things. There was a lot of space in there. You could stick your hand in there and put, work with tools and all that. Now they're a lot more technical. All right, and so the trades are you have to realize is going into the trades that you have to have some knowledge. And trust me, and I will say this, I do not want people in this class who are just trying to get out of an English class. I don't want someone working on my car who's like that. All right. I want someone working on my car that is one of my major investments, and is the major investment other than your house for most Americans. To know exactly what they're doing. I depend on my vehicles to get to work. We all do. All right. We need them for the supply chain. All right. For the civilization that we have, you have to keep them running, and you have to know what you're doing. Okay. So there's a philosophy, but you need to hear stuff like that also. Okay. All right. So here's just another cool electric vehicle that I just thought, I don't even know what this is. All right. But it's just electric and cool. All right. So maybe this is what you will be fixing in 2050 or something like that. But, I would hope so, because that's just kind of cool. Here's a statistic I got off the website from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the United States, that job growth for auto mechanics looks pretty pretty good. We're not producing enough. We need more auto mechanics, and we need actually more people in trades in general. We need more plumbers, and we need more electricians, and we need more carpenters. We're finding out masons and pipe fitters and all those people like that. We know now, they're essential. All right. And, we need these people to keep the civilization working. All right. So the job prospects for the trades is looking pretty good. Okay. If you go into them. All right. So, do that. All right. And that's where you kind of fit into the big picture of things. All right. So let's talk about physics in general and the relationship that physics has with you. All right, let's start with the physicist. Here's a physicist. This guy is Michio Kaku. All right, I believe he teaches out of New York University. He's a theoretical physicist. And what do these people do? Well, he's standing by a chalkboard with a whole bunch of like equations on it, and that's really what they do. These people spend all day generating equations and doing math. And why you say, like, why would I need that? Well, because they generate the equations, then give them to the engineers, and then the engineers use those equations to design the vehicles. Okay. So this is the kind of the first step in the technological process, is this guy right here. Okay. Here's another one, Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize winner. All right. In physics, again, there he is in front of his chalkboard. And these people do this. I was a graduate physics student at URI. And I spent all day in East Hall, which is the physics building there, taking classes and doing this stuff. And there are real physicists at URI. We have them. They generate equations. They just, sit there all day long. Well, not all day when they teach a class or two, but in between classes, actually, they spend the majority of the time doing their research, all right, and furthering the knowledge of human beings. And then we take these equations and we give them to these guys right here. These are the engineers. This is a design team. I think when I got on Google and I did Google Images and I did Ford design team or something like that. These are the people who design the vehicles. They have a lot of knowledge in physics. All right. And they design them and design the means of production for making them. Okay. And yes, they do work. These guys, yeah, they're white collar and all that, but they do get out of the office and get their hands dirty, because someone has to go down to the factory and make sure that the vehicles are being built correctly, and that the factory machinery is working and so on. And they do work with mechanics also. All right. So, in order to ensure that the mechanic knows what they are doing. And then here you are. All right. So this is you, in the year, I don't know, 2043 or something like that. And, you're working on some, you have to have some technical knowledge. Gone are the days of a mechanic not having to go to school to learn how to be a mechanic. Yeah, you can still do that, but the vehicles, especially if we transition over to electric, it's going to be harder and harder to just self-teach yourself. All right. So, and that's kind of where we're going. And you guys are the ones who keep the things running for people. All right. So there you are. And that's kind of where you fit in to things. Here's what you need to learn. All right. I'm going to teach you Newton's laws of motion. You need to know what a force is. You need to know what forces do, because vehicles control powerful forces. Don't believe me? Take a gallon of gasoline and stick a match to it. It'll probably be the last thing you ever do. Why? Because the chemical energy stored in that fuel is immense. All right. And it will, now just blowing up a gallon of gasoline is not very useful, but taking that gasoline and controlling that explosion, which is what an internal combustion engine does, is useful. Okay, just simply burning gasoline, that doesn't really help anyone, but taking the gasoline and controlling the burning process with an engine is very useful, obviously. All right, but we need to be able to control it, and that's why you need to know Newton's laws. Okay, and also because vehicles are subject to stresses, friction, both internally in the engine and between the tires and the road and with the air. Obviously, the explosive capability inside the fuel, or if we transition to electrics, the force of electricity and magnetism. And I know I'm saying two words, but electricity and magnetism, you'll find out, is actually one force. All right, you can't have electricity without magnetism. You can't have magnetism without some form of electricity. Okay, and you'll learn that. All right, you need to know it. You need to know about the concept of mechanical work and energy. You need to know what energy is and what our knowledge is of it. Why? Because um, vehicles don't run without an energy source. Very simply. Okay, we need to have it, and the civilization needs to have it. All right. Here's the sun. The sun is a major source of energy on the earth, and we're transitioning to solar wind right now. But also, the sun is ultimately, it was solar energy that was stored in the leaves of plants 360 some million years ago that eventually died and became coal, natural gas, and oil. Okay, so there's that. You need to know the simple machines, okay, like a lever and a wheel and axle and an inclined plane. Why? Because all complex machines, including the motors in the vehicles that you're working on, are simply, not simply, but they're combinations of the simple machines. Okay, complex machines are made from simple machines. So you need to know about them. We need to study rotation. We need to study gear ratios. Okay. The why? Because this is the way we take the power generated in the engine and transmit it into motion through a transmission. And these things are pretty complex. All right. That's why engineers go to school for 4 years. All right. And study these things, because they're, again, you look at this basic gear system here. That's not, you don't just slap that thing together. All right. That took a lot of knowledge designing that. And I'm not talking just about gear ratios, but also the metallurgy involved, the type of steel to use, the type of lubricant that goes in there that can, survive high temperatures and low temperatures, like in the wintertime when the car gets to 10 degrees, below zero or something, and then heats up when you start using it. So you need to know about that stuff. Okay. You need to know basic electric circuits. This is a battery pack for a modern electric car. Again, this thing will put out about 300 volts or so direct current, and that's a huge power source. All right, that's a lot of energy. Okay, there it is, the battery pack. It's in a electric vehicle called a Nissan Leaf. All right, and there you have it. Okay, you will probably be working on things like this as time goes on. You need to know basic electricity. You need to know about magnetism, because we generate electricity with spinning magnets in a device called a generator. You need to know how a generator works. In addition to that, this is a Tesla braking system. It is a regenerative braking system. And what it does is it uses the kinetic energy in the wheels to stop the wheel. It's a braking system that will slow down a vehicle without friction brakes, which are great. Why? Because they last a heck of a lot longer. And what they also do is they turn the wheel into a generator, which then goes back and takes that kinetic energy of the car and puts it back into the battery pack, and therefore you didn't lose that energy, you recouped it, which is why on some electric vehicles the efficiency rating is somewhere in the 90%. Okay, meaning that only like 10% of the energy from the battery pack is wasted, and like 90% goes into actually moving the car, which is pretty darn good compared to 30% for an internal combustion engine. Okay, so you need to know how this stuff works. Okay, here's an alternator. all right, which is basically a generator. And you need to know how that works. You need to know that zombies eat brains. Write that down because you need to know that. Okay, that's important. And there you have it. Okay, so that's basically the introduction to this class. Make sure you know what I just told you. Make sure you took notes on what I just said about the different, about, engineers and physicists and mechanics and where they kind of fall into the big picture and stuff. So you kind of know your place in things. All right, okay. There you have that. Goal us out and enjoy your apocalypse.